This morning, we're going to be visiting a very special place, the Ashram of Valmiki Muni, the author of Valmiki Ramayana. So I thought before we begin this morning's discussion, we'll do a little backdrop hanging again. Remember that metaphor? In the center, there's the deity, Ramachandra and his eternal consort Sita and Lakshman and Hanuman, and that's the deity. And then there's the backdrop and the altar. So, what are we doing? We've been hearing many details about different personalities, but what's the purpose behind all of this? The purpose is to become attached to the personality of Godhead, Lord Ramachandra. And by becoming attached to Lord Ramachandra, all the temporary attachments of this world that cause us so much grief, not done in the mood of service to the Supreme Lord, but done in the mood of attachment and enjoying, controlling, and suffering, and confusion, and struggle. Daivihiyesha gunamayi, mama maya duratyaya, Mamaevaye prapadyant. So to come to the position of prapadyante, surrender, sharanagati, shelter of the personality of Godhead. And these various personalities, they're all part of this grand orchestration of that, coming to the shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And of all the persons who assisted Lord Ram in his pastimes, Valmiki Muni is very important. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Ramachandra, selected Valmiki Muni to be the one to enshrine, to record and sing and pass on for generations, and according to the benediction of Brahma, for as long as creation exists. Valmiki Muni was the one selected by Lord Ramachandra to do that. Just like Srila Vyasadeva, such an important post that in each of the Yuga cycles, at the end of the Dwapara Yuga, there's somebody that occupies that post of Vyasadeva. Because Kali Yuga is coming, and memory fades, and so the Vedas have to be written down, and Vedavyasa does that and makes them accessible, readily accessible, by taking the Vedas and dividing them into different divisions and compiling the descriptions of those different divisions in the Smriti section and so forth. He's a Shaktivesh avatar. He's empowered. Krishna, we know from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishna Shakti Vina Nahe Tara Pravartana, according to Chaitanya Charitamrita. To do a service like this, even just to induce somebody to chant Hare Krishna, you can't do that without Krishna Shakti. And to do it means there's Krishna Shakti. And without it, you can't do it without Krishna Shakti. It's just what to speak of, present to the world all the Vedas, as Vyasadeva did. Such an important post, according to Parashara Muni, who was previously a Vyasa in a previous Yuga cycle, 25th Yuga cycle of Vaivasvata Manu. Parashara Muni was Vyasa. And he compiled the Vedas. He says, this Vyasa is special It's not just because he's his son. He said the way that he has compiled the Vedas, particularly the Mahabharata, he's Krishna himself. So our Vyas is Krishna himself, not just an empowered jiva, according to Parashara Muni. And Jiva Goswami confirms. So it's such an important post, and Valmiki was given that specific service to enshrine the glories of Lord Ramachandra for all of eternity, or for the duration of the creation. Such an important service given to such a qualified person. So we're going to be hearing about Valmiki this morning, and also when we go to his ashram. But let's bear in mind what we're doing. It's to help us appreciate the person who Lord Ramachandra selected through his devotee, Lord Brahma, to give to the world the means of becoming attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus lift ourselves to the position of transcendence out of this position of struggle. Very important person. So that's what we're doing. It's part of the whole gift. Why Lord Ramachandra appears, why the Personality of Godhead appears, and the different individuals who are participants in that Leela. So for those of you who remembered to bring with you this glossary and genealogical chart, we're going to make reference to it. Page 22. The chart, that's the first two charts, 1 and 2. And it's showing, the title is Valmiki's Lineage, as per Srimad Bhagavatam. So when you get open to that page, you'll see in the left-hand side there's Varuna. And according to the Bhagavatam, Varuna is the father of Valmiki. According to the Bhagavatam, Varuna is the father of Valmiki. And the mother, according to the Bhagavatam, was an anthill. According to this chart, Varuna had 3 sons. One was Bhrigu, another was Valmiki, and a third was Vashishta. And I'm going to give you a little preview and then we'll go into the detail. 2 of those 3 sons, according to Sridhar Swami, they're amazing. They're super excellent by their erudition and by their Vaishnav character. Valmiki and Bhrigu. And the third son, Vashishta, is in another category, and that is he was Brahman realized he didn't have the same Vaishnava capacity, quality of Bhrigu and Valmiki. They were brothers, each of different mothers, but sons of Varuna. So now we're going to go to the left of the chart. If you have the sheet, it says Varuna on the left-hand side, who had 3 sons. So Varuna, according to the Bhagavatam, is the 9th son of Kashyapa and Aditi. The Adityas are sons of Aditi, and they're primarily demigods. The number 11 of the sons of Kashyapa and Aditi was Vamana, an incarnation of Lord Vishnu. Kashyapa and Aditi were the father of Vamana. Number 9 of those 11 was Varuna, according to the Bhagavatam. Now we're going to go further to the left. Kashyapa was the son of Marichi, and Marichi was the son of Brahma. So now let's do it again from the other side. Brahma, Lord Brahma, the first of his offspring were the 4 Kumaras, then Lord Shiva, then 12 sages. Marichi was one of those 12 sages. A son of Marichi was Kashyapa. Kashyapa then became married to 13 daughters by arrangement of Lord Brahma, 13 daughters of Daksha. Daksha was one of the 12. Narada Muni was one of the 12. There's a number that were of the 12. There's 12 in number. So now we have 3 of those 12. Narada, Marichi, and Daksha. Daksha, we know from 6th canto. This is Daksha part 2, but it's the same Daksha. Daksha had 10,000 sons and 1,000 sons, and they all became brahmacharis. They joined Narada Muni's brahmacharya ashram. After Narada understood their qualification, he invited them into his ashram. Daksha became very angry. He cursed Narada. You have to travel all the time. You can't stay in one place. Narada said, great. Perfect for my service. Thank you very much. So after those sons were born, Daksha changed direction and had daughters, 30-something daughters. 13 of those daughters of Daksha were given in marriage by Brahma's arrangement, because Brahma was the father of Daksha. Brahma was the father of Daksha. So, anyway, Daksha's daughters, that was the previous Daksha. So, Daksha's daughters were then given in marriage, 13 of them to Kashyapa. One of those 13 was Aditi. There were 11 sons of Aditi. One of them was Varuna, number 9 of the 11. So that's the Bhagavatam. We're looking at the chart now. Varuna's over there on the left. And this Varuna, ninth son of Kashyapa and Aditi, had 3 sons. And Bhrigu was one, according to the Bhagavatam. His wife was Charshani. Then Valmiki will read what the Bhagavatam says about Valmiki. This is 6th canto, chapter 18. By the semen of Varuna, the great mystic Valmiki took birth from an anthill. That was his mother. Bhrigu and Valmiki were specific sons of Varuna. Look at the genealogical chart. Different mothers. Whereas Agastya and Vashishta Rishi were the common sons of Varuna and Mitra, the 10th son of Aditi. And the Bhagavatam gives this description. Once upon a time, a heavenly society girl named Urvashi was passing by. And Mitra went, woo, 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 Urvashi, let's get together. Yeah. And Urvashi consented. However, shortly thereafter, Varuna saw Urvashi and said, woo, 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 let's get together. And Mitra became angry. Wait a minute, she's mine. Wait a minute, So Urvashi made a peaceful solution. Very interesting. Kind of unusual too. These two sons of Urvashi, one by Varuna and the other by Mitra, the 10th son of Kashyapa and Aditi, took their birth by Urvashi's arrangement. Their semen was placed in a pot. No womb of a mother, just a pot. And after some time, two sons were born from the pot. Kumbha. So, Agastya was the son of Mitra, and Vashishta, the same Vashishta that we've been speaking about, was born from the pot. So Vashishta, if you look at your chart, Vashishta was one of the sons of Varuna, born of the pot, but deposited in the pot because of the attraction of Varuna and Mitra by Urvashi, the heavenly society girl. In his commentary to that verse, Sridhar Swami's commentary to that verse, he says, this language of special sons, namely Bhrigu and Valmiki, so Bhrigu and Valmiki, sons of Varuna, they were special because of their erudition, vast scholarship, deep realization of Vedic wisdom, and their high Vaishnava character. It's for that reason that Valmiki was chosen by Lord Ramachandra to write his story. So Valmiki, according to the Bhagavatam, is the son of Varuna, born from an anthill. Now, I know memories in Kali Yuga are very short, but just yesterday, I want to remind you that we heard a very different description. The description that we heard yesterday was that Varuna was previously known by a different name. Vaishravana was his name, and Vaishravana was the son of Vishravas, and Vishravas was the son of Palastya, and Palastya was the son of Brahma. So let's do it the reverse order. Brahma, one of the 12 sages, was Palastya. So we now have spoken of 4 of the 12. Palastya took his residence on a mountain, Mount Meru, that was also inhabited by Trinabindu. When Trinabindu's daughter came to the place where she was looking for her girlfriends, but they weren't there because Palastya had made this utterance that any women that come into this place immediately will become pregnant. So girls scattered. But Trinabindu's daughter didn't know that, so Trinabindu became pregnant. Trinabindu requested Palastya to accept his daughter as his married wife. He accepted her, and a son was born. Very qualified son, Vishravas. Vishravas was so qualified that Bharadraj requested Vishravas to accept his daughter in marriage. He said yes. And then a son was born, Vaishravana, the son of Vishravas. And Vaishravana did austerities requesting Lord Brahma to become one of the guardians of the universe. So he was given that post of Varuna. So we've already heard 6 times, now here's 7 times. That's okay because there's different kalpa beda. There are differences of kalpas or millenniums or days of Brahma, etc. So the descriptions are different because it's a different millennium. No problem. That's how Varuna became Varuna. Two different descriptions. Bhagavatam description, Valmiki Ramayana description. However he became Varuna, the Valmiki Ramayana holds that Varuna was the father of Valmiki. Now, how he became the father of Valmiki is described in the Bhagavatam in a very specific way, and it doesn't describe identically in Valmiki Ramayana. It simply says there are several places within Ramayana, Valmiki Ramayana, specifically in the Uttanapada section, towards the end of the whole of Ramayana, where the author Valmiki speaks about himself as the son of Varuna. I am the 10th son of Varuna. He says in the same Uttarakhanda, thus was sung the Ramayana by the mighty son of Varuna. And Brahma signified his glad approval. Now, if you remember back the very first day, one of the commentators from the Sri Vaishnava line is Govindaraja. And the very first verse of Ramayana in Balakanda, he writes the commentary about Valmiki being the son of Varuna in this way. All through the countless years, trees and shrubs sprang around him, while an immense anthill arose on all sides, completely concealing him from view. That's Valmiki commenting on the first verse. Later on, Varuna sent down heavenly rains which dissolved the strange tenement, the anthill around him. Coming out of it, he was hailed as the son of Varuna, known as Valmiki. So Varuna, according to Valmiki Ramayana, however he became Varuna, Bhagavatam version or Valmiki Ramayana version, he is the father of Valmiki. So we're going to be visiting his ashram soon. And Varuna is his father. Varuna is one of the most important devas, demigods. Now I'm going to go back a little bit in this position of Bhrigu. Bhrigu Muni. We heard Sridhar Swami saying he along with Valmiki are special amongst the sons of Varuna. We know from Bhagavad Gita, in the 10th chapter, the opulences of the Absolute, Krishna says, of sages, I am Bhrigu. Amongst all the sages, Bhrigu is topmost. In the Bhagavad Gita purport, chapter 10, Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada writes, Brahma, the first living creature within the universe, created several sons for propagation of various kinds of species. Among these sons, Bhrigu is the most powerful sage. This Bhrigu is the first, that's not Prabhupada's purport. So, let's go back to our genealogical chart, page 22. One of the sons of Bhrigu was Shaunaka. Those of you that have read Bhagavatam, you know that Shaunaka was the one that was asking questions to Sutta. In fact, not only in the Bhagavatam, but again and again in the Puranas. Bhrigu's right up there. He's in the line of Bhrigu. He's the son of Bhrigu. And Bhrigu and Shaunaka and the other son, Valmiki, they're very important, both, very important in the propagation of Vedic knowledge. So we're going to the place of Valmiki's ashram, and his brother is Brigu, and they're both really important people in the whole of specifically one of the services that we also are given, the propagation of Vedic knowledge. But we have to receive it, you have to be qualified to receive it, we have to hear carefully, attentively, so that we can receive it and live by it and then propagate it. That's our lives. That's our service in this lifetime. So these are very important personalities. Now, there's other Ramayanas besides Valmiki Ramayana, and many of you have heard, I certainly heard, when I started hearing about Valmiki, that previously he was a dacoit. So that's not in Valmiki Ramayana. It's in the Adhyatma Ramayana, from which Tulsi in his Ramcharita Manas drew, and other writers of Ramayana's pastimes drew, where he was previously a dacoit, not born from an anthill, not the son of Varuna, and these other Ramayana versions. Different day of Brahma, that's a different millennium, different cycle of the pastime of Lord Ramachandra appearing and Valmiki writing. So, the description goes, Ratnakar was a forest dweller and a hunter. And one day when he was hunting, he happened to see at a distance a saffron-clad sadhu. It was Narada Muni. And just seeing him, there's details and details of his previous life before he was a hunter. But just seeing him, he was stunned, meaning there was some bhakti inside. But he came back to his Ratnakar position and went on with his hunting. Narada noticed that little glimmer of bhakti, that little spark, and started to flame the spark. And what Narada did was he approached the hunter and said, "My dear hunter, are you aware that the act of killing causes great pain to the animals? And the act of causing pain to animals is going to bring you very serious sin, karmic reaction. You're going to suffer terribly. Commensurate with all the suffering of all the animals, you will also have to suffer. Why do you do this?" Ratnakar was confused and said, "Well, the only reason I do this is to maintain my family." So expert Narada said, "Oh, if that's the case, if you're doing this only for your family, then your family should be willing to share in the karmic reaction for the sinful activities you're committing to maintain them." He said, "Surely they would." He said, "Go and ask them if they would." Yes, I'll go and ask them if they would. And when he went to his home and asked if they would, "Oh, no way are we going to accept the sinful reactions for your activities that cause karma that comes to you. You take the karma, we'll take the benefit, but not the responsibility." It was harsh, the way that they spoke to him. Not just what they said, but how they said it. "No way. You suffer, not us." So a little light went on. And so he went back to Narada and said, "You know what they said? They're not going to accept the karma. What should I do? It's my karma. What am I going to do?" Chant the holy name of Ram. That's what you can do. It'll relieve you of your karma. But he was so sinful. Piles and mountains of sinful condition. He couldn't say Rama. Couldn't say it. Couldn't say it. Narada's very expert. He just flipped it around. Then say Mara. Mara means death. Go ahead. Just let that be your mantra. Having faith in the words of Narada that he could become relieved of his karma and sinful tendencies and reactions to his past deeds, he began chanting Mara, Mara, Mara. And over and over again it became Rama. And he faithfully went on chanting Rama's name with great concentration. So much concentration that he was sitting motionless, and plants and creepers started growing all around him, and ants started climbing over his body and devouring his body. That he was just so absorbed he didn't feel anything. Years later, Narada Muni came to the same forest, and he heard the sound of Ram's name. Where's that coming from? Where's it coming from? He couldn't see any person. Then he saw this big anthill, and he heard the sound coming from the anthill. So Narada Muni took some celestial water and sprinkled the celestial water on the anthill, and the anthill dissolved. And there was Ratnakar, just as bones, but by the sprinkling of the celestial water, his body appeared again. And Narada exclaimed, Ratnakar, it's you. Ratnakar came to his external consciousness, recognized Narada Muni, and fell at his feet and offered his praises to Narada for saving him from his sinful way of life. And now this full absorption in the glories of Lord Ram, in the name of Ram. So then and there, Narada, having heard the 1 billion verses from Lord Brahma, his spiritual master and father, he related in detail the story of Lord Ram and his life and pastimes and entourage and his abode and Ayodhya and everything in detail to Valmiki. So Valmiki became an enriched Ram Bhakta. That's Adhyatma Ramayana, how Valmiki became Valmiki. Narada gave him a name. Instead of Ratnakar, I'll call you Valmiki, which means born of an anthill. So we're going to the ashram of Valmiki shortly. And the place is about 2.5 hours plus some time, depending upon how quickly you get in your buses and how long it takes to get there. Hint, get in the buses promptly. It's called Bittur. Bittur. And Bittur has some history besides Valmiki's ashram. It was previously known as Brahmavarta. Brahmavarta meaning the sitting place of Lord Brahma, because it is said, now this isn't Bhagavatam's source, this is local lore. Doesn't have the same weight as the Bhagavatam source, but local lore says In the next day of Brahma accepted this particular place where we're going today as his sitting place where he engaged in meditation and sacrifice in order to recreate the universe, or the part that was dissolved after his night. No, Brahma has his own place in Brahmaloka. But Brahma can have different residences. Wealthy people have different residences, don't they? So one of those places, according to local lore, was Brahma Vart. And one of the places that we're going to visit in Brahma Vart is a kund, or ghat, Brahma Vart ghat. And on the ghat, and the steps to the ghat that leads to the river, there's a horse nail. I haven't seen it, but that's what it says. And the horse nail is said to be where Brahma was engaging in an Ashvamedha Yagya. We heard about an Ashvamedha Yagya already, a horse sacrifice. And so from the hoof of the horse that was part of the horse sacrifice, there's a nail. At least that's what the local people say. There's another ghat called Pattar Ghat that's just is more a recent one. It's particularly known for the fantastic architecture by some king that built it, and it's noted specifically for that reason. Fantastic architecture, red stone. Just like in Vrindavan, the temple that was built by Rupa Goswami, designed and built by Rupa Goswami, is red sandstone. It's, very special. So this is similarly the materials that the god is made of and the design of it is special. There's a place called Dhruva Tila. Many of you have been to Vrindavan, and we know from the Bhagavatam that Dhruva Tila is in Mahavan, in Vrindavan, one of the forests of Vrindavan. That's the place. According to history, King Uttanapada was the father of Dhruva, and King Uttanapada's palace was in Bittur. So the palace isn't where Dhruva underwent his austerity, from the Bhagavatam at least. Dhruva, let's narrate the story, but quickly. Dhruva was insulted by his stepmother in the palace, which according to local history is in Bittur, or was in Bittur. And then his mother said, you can get a kingdom that's better than your father's and his father's father from Lord Vishnu. So he went to the forest to find Vishnu. Narada told him to go to Vrindavan. So the place, Dhruvatila, is in Vrindavan, according to the Bhagavatam. But the palace of Uttanapada was in Bittur, according to local history. So, in the genealogical chart, just below that of Valmiki is Dhruva. So let's look at the chart. Lord Brahma, one of his sons, direct sons, was Swayambhuva Manu and Shatarupa. And they had 2 sons, 3 daughters. One of those sons was Uttanapada, and Uttanapada had 2 queens, Suniti and Suruchi, and with those 2 queens, 1 son each. Dhruva was one of the sons. That's the lineage. And the capital, according to local history, was at Bittur, where we're going shortly. So let's just hear quickly the Dhruva story, and then we'll be finished for this morning. Swayambhuva Manu had 2 sons, and traditionally the elder son becomes the king. And the elder son was Priyavrata. This is from the Bhagavatam. Priyavrata said, "No thanks, Dad, I don't want to become king. With your permission, Uttanapada, my younger brother, he's really good. Let him become king, and I'd like to go to the forest and perfect my bhakti. Just do that only." So Swayambhuva Manu said, "Okay, you can go to the forest." Uttanapada became king. He had 2 queens. Suniti first gave birth to the first son, Dhruva, and Suruchi gave birth to the second son. And the younger queen was more attractive to the king than his elder queen, and so he had some partiality towards her. So he was showing affection to her son, and he had her son Suruchi's son on his lap, and Dhruva saw his younger brother on his father's lap. He wanted to climb up on his father's lap, little boy, get the affection of his father, and Dhruva was insulted. Don't get on your lap. Don't get on his lap. You will never sit on the lap of your father. You never sit on the throne of your father in this lifetime because you weren't born from my womb. But there is a possibility. You can die and then take birth again from my womb. And then you can sit on your father's lap. Cruel. Nasty. Dhruva somehow understood what she was saying and the nastiness of her message. So he looked to his father. His father was silent because he didn't want to say anything that would win the disfavor of his favorite queen. So he just was silent. No protection from his father. Dhruva burst into tears, ran from the palace, ran to his mother, who was in a secluded place, and cried and cried and cried and cried. Little boy. She comforted her son. What happened? You know, mothers, what happened? Suruchi spoke like this. Uttanapada didn't say anything, and I want a kingdom better than my father, better than my father's father, better than my father's father's father. How do I get that kingdom? If you get the favor of Lord Vishnu, anything can happen. Oh, how do I get the favor of Lord Vishnu? Where do I find him? I don't know. I just live in the palace. But I heard that sages, they go to the forest and somehow they find Vishnu. Fantastic. I'm leaving for the forest right now. And he left. Didn't even have some samosas in his lunchbox. He just left. And he went searching and searching and searching in the forest, and He found lots of trees and wild animals and birds and insects and mosquitoes and all kinds of forest things, but no Vishnu. But Narada Muni heard that the son of King Uttanapada has gone to the forest, so he went to find him, and he found him. And Narada, heard from Dhruva what he wanted. I want a kingdom better than my father. No. His father, Uttanapada's father, was Swayambhuva Manu. Swayambhuva Manu's father was Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma's father is Lord Vishnu. He wanted a kingdom better than his father's father's father. He wanted to rule Vaikuntha. Little boy. I'll show him, and I'll show her. So, in many ways, Narada tried, his wonderful description, to persuade Dhruva to give up this get-back mentality that's not going to please Lord Vishnu at all. You can't get a kingdom that way. You have to give it up. And it's too difficult. Great sages, they go to the forest in lifetimes and they don't find Vishnu. And so really you're grown up and then you can come back to the forest and look for... He tried so many things. Dhruva was adamant. Your instructions are good, but I can't follow them because I'm Kshatriya spirited. I want a kingdom! And you're a great sage. You can help me find Vishnu. Can you help me find Vishnu, please? Narada saw he was so determined. So he gave him the means to find Vishnu, bhakti. But bhakti has to be pure to find Vishnu. So he gave him the means to practice bhakti and become pure. 3 things, great austerities, 4 things. Great austerities, a process of meditation, because that was the means for the age, chanting of a mantra, not like it's only in Kali Yuga there's mantra. In Satya Yuga there's mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, and he gave him a place to do it, a holy place. Vrindavan. 1, 2, 3, 4. And it wasn't just, you could have, it's by the mercy of Narada, not just by, technology or some mechanical something or other. It's by bhakti only that one can achieve the goal that Dhruva wanted. So he went from a mixed devotee to a pure devotee in 6 months. Whew. But he was intense. And the austerities he did, we couldn't possibly do. But Lord Vishnu came before him. So the place where we're going, one of the places we're going to be seeing is Dhruva Tila, which according to the Bhagavatam is not where Dhruva underwent austerity. And just one last thing, which is there are many, many places. Valmiki had ashrams in many places. The list is long. It's too long to narrate, like 30 different places in different parts of India. And guess what? Every one of them says, this is where Valmiki wrote Ramayana. They all say that. This is where Sita came when she was banished by Ram. And this is where Love and Kush were born. They have interests that aren't necessarily pure by making those claims. Now in Valmiki Ramayana, we're going to hear this as we go to Chitrakoot. Ram, Lakshman and Sita together go into the forest, and after they leave the hermitage of Bharadwaj Muni, he suggests that they go to Chitrakoot to make their residence in the forest, and describes it and its beauty and so forth. And we'll do more of that. When they reach Chitrakoot, the first place they go is the Ashram of Valmiki. So he had multiple ashrams. One is where we're going today, and another is in Chitrakoot. And they stayed, they spent the day and evening with Valmiki in Chitrakoot before they took another place, not so far away, where Lakshmana, under the direction of Ram, built a little cottage where they stayed, which is where Bharata and the entourage from Ayodhya came to find Ram, to bring Ram back to Ayodhya. So that was one of the, for sure, according to Valmiki Ramayana, one of the ashrams of Valmiki. So now, which one of those ashrams is the ashram where Sita went and Lava and Kush were born and Valmiki Ramayana was written? Who can say? But this is one of the ashrams of Valmiki, so we'll, at least for the day, maybe later we'll see it a little differently, but for the day, these are the glories of that place, specifically. Valmiki Ramayana was written at Valmiki's ashram. He received this particular benediction that, according to the Valmiki Ramayana, when the incident took place where the Krancha bird was shot by the hunter, it was at the Tamasa river, because normally Valmiki would take his morning bath in the Sarayu. So it gives some idea of where it might have been. Geographically, they're not so terribly far away. But, we're getting in a bus and 2.5+ hours to get there, so it's some distance. In any case, it's something like the place where, in South India, where Lord Nrsingadev is exclusively worshipped. What's the name of that place? Ahovalam. Those of you from India, you've heard of Ahovalam. Those of you from China, you may not have heard of Ahovalam. It's a place where there's celebrated multiple temples of Lord Nrsingadev. It's just dedicated to Lord Nrsingadev's worship. And one of those places, one of the temples, way up on the top of a hill, very, very difficult hill to go and see, the place where the local people say, this is where Hiranyakashipu smashed the pillar and Lord Nrsingadev appeared, right there. So a little history is, some early in the Hare Krishna movement, Prabhupada sent 2 of his sannyas disciples to visit places in South India, specifically for learning some of the details of deity worship. So one of the places they visited was Ahovalam, and they heard from the local people, this is where Lord Nrsingadev appeared. And then they returned back after their South India travel, reported to Prabhupada, we heard this is where Lord Nrsingadev appeared. However, Srila Prabhupada, our understanding is that Hiranyakashipu had taken over the kingdom of Indra, and that's the place in the kingdom of Indra where Hiranyakashipu appeared. Which was it, Prabhupada? Is it there or there? And Prabhupada didn't say, a clear yes or no. He said, when worship goes on for such a long period of time with such devotion for Lord Nrsingadev, they're non-different. Now, I've had this discussion with people that are on this side of the fence and that side of the fence on this topic, and the ones that say, that's the place where Lord Nrsingadev appeared, how can you say that? You know how that goes. And others say, it's not possible because it was over there. What Prabhupada said is it's none different. So, we're going to Bittur, which is Valmiki's ashram, where the local people worship as the place where Valmiki wrote Ramayana. And Lord Brahma appeared and gave him this benediction. So tomorrow morning, if time permits, I'm going to assemble some images we'll show on the screen that will summarize, just visually, some of these pastimes, like you did yesterday with the Tataka. Those images. So similarly, some of those. And where Valmiki is visited by Lord Brahma, giving him this benediction to write Ramayana, direct instruction from Brahma to do so. Shri Ramachandra ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanandi.
Hare Krishna. Kindly wait for a few announcements. Yesterday evening, when I announced sponsorships